The transport ship dropped out of hyperspace, and Captain Park saw Prime for the first time. The planet hung in the darkness of space like a jewel made of ice and light. Its surface was covered in white crystals that reflected the light of three distant suns. Even from orbit, he could see the great cities shining beneath the clouds. Stood at the observation window with his hands behind his back. He was 32 years old, tall for a human, with broad shoulders and a face that rarely showed emotion. His black hair was cut short in military style. His dark eyes watched the planet grow larger as the ship descended. He did not understand why he was here. 3 weeks ago, he had been stationed on a border world doing security work for Alliance mining operations. It was simple work, dangerous sometimes, but simple. Then the orders came: transfer to Prime, personal guard duty for the alien queen. Had read the briefing files many times. They were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They lived for thousands of years. They had pale violet skin and silver eyes that could look through a person's soul. They were telepaths who could read minds with a touch, and they considered most other species to be beneath them. Especially humans. Humans were young. Humans were loud. Humans burned bright and died fast. They had watched 100 species rise and fall while they sat on their crystal thrones. They had no interest in humans. Yet somehow, the new treaty between the Dominion and the Galactic Alliance required a human guard for the Queen. Did not know the politics behind this decision. He only knew his duty. The ship landed on a platform of white stone, walked down the ramp and felt the cold air of Prime fill his lungs. Everything here was white and silver and pale blue. The buildings rose like frozen waves. The sky was the color of pearls. A group of waited for him. They were tall, much taller than humans, with long limbs and faces that seemed carved from marble. They wore flowing robes of silver fabric. Their expressions showed nothing. One of them stepped forward. He was old, even by standards. His violet skin had faded to a pale gray, and deep lines marked his face, but his silver eyes were sharp. "I am advisor," he said. His voice was cold and formal. "You are the human guard." "Captain Park, sir." Looked at him for a long moment. His eyes moved over his face, his uniform, his posture. Felt like he was being measured and found wanting. "Follow me," said. They walked through corridors of crystal and light. Other passed them, and each one looked at with expressions of confusion or disgust. He kept his eyes forward and his face calm. He had faced worse. Growing up in a military orphanage had taught him to ignore the looks of others. The palace was beautiful in a way that made him uncomfortable. Everything was too perfect, too clean, too cold. There were no warm colors anywhere. No wood or cloth or anything that felt alive, just crystal and metal and light. They entered the throne room. It was vast. The ceiling was made of glass, and through it could see the three suns of the system burning in the sky. The walls were lined with guards in silver armor. At the far end of the room, stairs led up to a throne carved from a single piece of black crystal. The throne was empty. "Wait here," said. "The Queen will arrive soon." Stood at attention, he waited. The guards watched him with cold eyes. Minutes passed, then more minutes. He did not move. He had learned patience in the military. He could stand still for hours if needed. Then a door opened behind the throne, and Queen entered. Had seen pictures of her in the briefing files, but pictures could not capture what she was. She was tall, even for with skin the color of twilight and hair that fell like silver water down her back. She wore a gown of deep purple that moved like smoke around her body. A crown of crystal stars rested on her head. But it was her eyes that held him, silver like all but deeper. There was something ancient in those eyes, something that had seen centuries of joy and sorrow, something that carried a weight could not understand. She walked toward her throne with slow, graceful steps. The entire court bowed too, just as he had been trained. Then the Queen looked at him. She stopped walking. For a moment nothing moved. The court was silent. The guards were silent. Even the air seemed to stop. Stared at, her silver eyes went wide. Her hand, which had been reaching for the throne, dropped to her side. Her perfect composure, the mask she had worn for centuries, cracked like thin ice. Her lips parted. Her breath caught in her throat. "Impossible," she whispered. The word was quiet, but in the silence of the throne room everyone heard it. Stepped forward, concern on his ancient face. "My queen, is something wrong?" Did not answer. She could not stop looking at the human, at the way he stood with his hands behind his back, at the angle of his jaw, at the calm steadiness in his dark eyes, at the way he held himself, ready to move, ready to protect, even in a room full of strangers. Her heart, which had been frozen for 80 years, began to beat faster. She knew this was not possible. She knew the dead did not return. She knew that humans were different species, separated by biology and thousands of years of evolution. But the way this human stood, the way he looked at her without fear, the quiet strength in his posture, it was exactly how had stood on the day she first met him. Her husband, her king, her heart, dead for 80 cycles, gone in a flash of fire and war, leaving her alone on a throne she had never wanted. Forced herself to breathe. She forced herself to move. She walked to her throne and sat down, her movements stiff and unnatural. The court noticed. They always noticed everything. Whispers began to spread like ripples in still water. Watched the queen with worried eyes. He remembered. He had served the king for 200 years, and now, looking at this human, he felt a chill run down his spine. The resemblance was not in the face. Humans looked nothing like, but there was something else, something in the soul, something that could not be explained by genetics or chance. Gripped the arms of her throne. She spoke and her voice was steady, though it cost her great effort. "Captain Park, you are assigned to my personal guard. You will protect me with your life. Do you understand?" Bowed again. "Yes, Your Majesty." His voice was calm and deep, respectful but not afraid. Closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her mask was back in place. But something had changed. Something had broken open inside her, and she did not know if she could ever close it again. "We'll show you to your quarters," she said. "You begin your duties tomorrow." "Yes, Your Majesty." Followed out of the throne room. He did not understand what had happened. He did not know why the queen had looked at him like she had seen a ghost, but he was a soldier. He followed orders. He did not ask questions. Behind him, Queen sat on her throne of black crystal and watched him go. Her hands trembled. Her heart ached with a pain she had thought she would never feel again. For 80 years she had been empty. For 80 years she had ruled without joy. For 80 years she had waited to die so she could join in whatever came after. And now a human had walked into her throne room and torn open all the wounds she thought had healed. She did not know if this was a blessing or a curse. She only knew that nothing would ever be the same. The palace never slept, but it grew quiet at night. The 3 suns set one by one, and the crystal walls dimmed to a soft blue glow. Servants moved through the corridors like shadows, speaking in whispers. Guards changed their posts in silence. Lay in his quarters and stared at the ceiling. The room was comfortable but cold, like everything on this world. The bed was too soft. The air smelled like nothing. He missed the smell of earth and rain and human things. He thought about the queen's face when she first saw him. He thought about the way her eyes had gone wide, the way her hand had trembled. He had seen many reactions to his presence over the years. Respect, fear, hatred, but never that. Never the look of someone seeing something impossible. He did not sleep well that night. In another part of the palace, Advisor sat in his private study. The room was filled with old books and older memories. Holographic images floated in the air, showing scenes from centuries past. Had served the royal family for over 400 years. He had seen kings rise and fall. He had watched empires crumble. Nothing surprised him anymore. Until today. He waved his hand and a new image appeared. It showed a male in battle armor standing on the deck of a warship. He had the same violet skin as all, but there was something different about him. His posture was loose and ready. His eyes were bright with life. He was smiling. King, dead for 80 cycles. Studied the image, then thought about the human he had met today. The face was completely different, of course. Humans and shared no physical features, but something else was the same. The way the human stood with his weight balanced, ready to move in any direction. The way his eyes watched everything without seeming to watch anything. The quiet confidence that came not from pride but from training and discipline. Had been unusual among. He had not been born to royalty. He had risen from the military, a common soldier who had shown uncommon courage. He had saved life during the border wars, and she had fallen in love with him against all tradition and expectation. The court had never accepted him. He was too warm, too emotional, too alive. He laughed at jokes. He touched people when he spoke to them. He walked through the palace like he owned it, not with arrogance but with simple comfort in his own skin. Had loved him for all of it, and when he died, a part of her had died too. Closed the hologram. He sat in the darkness of his study and worried about what this human's presence would do to his queen. The next morning, reported for duty. He stood outside the queen's chambers, wearing his alliance uniform, his weapon at his side. Other guards watched him with cold eyes. He ignored them. The doors opened and stepped out. She wore a simpler gown today, pale silver that made her skin glow. Her hair was pulled back and the crown was smaller, just a thin band of crystal across her forehead. She looked tired. "Walk with me," she said. They walked through the palace corridors, set a slow pace and matched it. He stayed one step behind her and to her right, close enough to protect her, far enough to show respect. It was the correct position. He had studied the protocols carefully. She noticed. "You have trained for this," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Where?" "The Alliance Military Academy, then 10 years of field service." "You were an orphan." Paused for a moment. He was surprised she knew that. "Yes, Your Majesty. My parents died when I was young. I was raised by the military." "So you have no family?" "The military is my family." Walked in silence for a while. They passed through a garden made of crystal flowers that chimed softly in an unfelt breeze. Everything was beautiful and cold. "Tell me about human families," she said suddenly. Considered the question. "I do not know much, Your Majesty. I never had one." "But you know something." "I know that humans care for their young. I know that they form bonds of love and loyalty. I know that they grieve when those bonds are broken." Stopped walking. She stood in the garden, surrounded by crystal flowers, and looked at the human guard who stood beside her. His face was calm and patient. He did not seem uncomfortable with her questions. He did not seem afraid of her. "You speak of grief," she said quietly. "Do you know grief, Captain?" Thought of the parents he could not remember. He thought of the soldiers he had lost in battles over the years. He thought of the emptiness that lived inside him, a space where love should be but never was. "Yes, Your Majesty," he said, "I know grief." "What do you do with it?" "I keep moving. I do my duty. I protect those I can protect because I could not protect those I lost." Stared at him. His words were simple, but they cut through her like a blade. She had heard philosophers speak about grief for hours without saying anything true. This human had said more truth in 3 sentences than she had heard in decades. "You are unusual for a human," she said. "I have been told that, Your Majesty." "What do other humans think of you?" "They think I am too quiet, too serious, too cold." Almost smiled, almost. "They think you are too loud, too emotional, too warm." "Then perhaps I am neither human nor. Perhaps you are something else entirely." They continued walking. The garden gave way to a balcony that overlooked the city below. Towers of crystal rose into the sky, and between them, ships floated like silver fish. The three suns were rising, painting the world in shades of gold and pink. Stood at the edge of the balcony, stood behind her, watching for threats even in this place of safety. It was what he did. It was who he was. "I had a husband once," said. Her voice was soft, almost lost in the wind. "His name was—" Said nothing. He understood that she was not looking for a response. "He was a soldier before he was a king. He came from nothing and became everything to me. The court never understood him. They thought he was beneath me. But he was the only one who ever saw me as I truly was, not a queen, not a symbol, just—" She turned to look at. Her silver eyes were bright with unshed tears. "He died 80 cycles ago, in a war that should never have happened. He died protecting me, just as you are assigned to do." Met her gaze. He did not look away from her pain. He did not try to offer empty comfort. "I am sorry for your loss, Your Majesty," he said simply. "Yesterday, when you walked into my throne room, I thought I was seeing his ghost." Was quiet for a moment. He understood now. He understood the look on her face, the trembling of her hand, the words she had whispered. "I am not a ghost, Your Majesty. I am just a soldier." "I know," turned back to the city. "But the way you stand, the way you hold yourself, the way you spoke just now about grief and duty, it is exactly how he would have spoken, exactly how he would have stood. Perhaps all soldiers are alike in some ways." "No, not all soldiers. Only the ones who protect because they cannot do anything else. Only the ones who give themselves completely to duty because they have nothing else to give." Thought about this. He had never considered his dedication to duty in those terms, but she was right. He protected others because he could not protect himself from the emptiness inside. He served because service gave him purpose. Was the same, continued. He could not stop being a protector. Even when he was king, even when he had servants and guards and an entire army, he still stood between danger and those he loved. It was his nature. It is your nature too. "I do not know if nature can cross the boundaries of species, Your Majesty." "Nor do I, but I have lived for 3,000 years, and I have learned that the universe is stranger than we imagine. Souls have patterns. Perhaps those patterns repeat." Did not know what to say to this. He was a practical man. He believed in what he could see and touch. But standing here on this alien world with this ancient queen who looked at him and saw a dead king, he felt something stir inside him, something that had been sleeping for a long time. "I cannot be him," he said quietly. "I can only be myself." "I know." His voice was gentle now. "I do not ask you to be him. I only ask you to be patient with an old queen who sees ghosts in unexpected places." "You are not old, Your Majesty." Laughed. It was a small sound, barely more than a breath, but it was the first time she had laughed in years. "I am older than your entire species has existed as a civilization, Captain. I am very old indeed." "Then you are wise, and wisdom is never a burden." Looked at him again. This human continued to surprise her. He spoke simply, but his words carried weight. He did not try to impress her or flatter her. He simply said what he meant. "Just like—" "Come," she said, straightening her shoulders and rebuilding her mask of royalty. "We have duties to attend to, and you have much to learn about protecting a queen." She walked back toward the palace, followed one step behind, one step to the right. And somewhere in the distance, watched them from a window. He saw the queen walking with purpose for the first time in decades. He saw the human matching her pace with natural grace. He saw something beginning that he could not name. He did not know if it would bring joy or sorrow. He only knew that change had come to Prime, carried in the heart of a human soldier who did not know his own power. 3 months passed like water through fingers. The seasons changed on Prime, though the change was subtle. The crystal cities grew colder. The three suns hung lower in the sky. The court prepared for the winter celebrations that would bring diplomats from across the galaxy. Had found his place. It was not an easy place, and it was not a comfortable one, but it was his. He stood guard outside the Queen's chambers every morning. He walked beside her through the palace corridors. He attended meetings and banquets and ceremonies, always watching, always ready. The court still treated him with cold suspicion. Most of them refused to speak to him directly. They talked around him as if he was furniture. But some had begun to soften. Lady, a young handmaiden who served the Queen, sometimes brought him food when he stood guard through long meetings. She was shy and rarely spoke, but her kindness was genuine. "The Queen speaks highly of you," said one evening, setting a cup of warm tea beside him. "She is generous," replied. "She is not generous, she is honest. There is a difference." Smiled at him, a quick flash of warmth that disappeared as fast as it came. Then she hurried away to her duties. Watched her go. He had learned much about culture in his time here. He had learned that they valued control above all things. Emotions were weaknesses to be hidden. Connections were liabilities to be avoided. The court was a web of power and politics where every word had three meanings and every smile hid a knife. But beneath the cold surface, some were different, and the Queen was very different indeed. Had continued to seek him out. Not every day, but often enough that the court had noticed and the whispers had grown louder. She asked him about human history. She asked him about human art and music and poetry. She asked him about the small things that humans did, the way they gathered for meals, the way they celebrated births, the way they mourned their dead. Answered as best he could. He was not an expert on human culture. He had spent most of his life outside of it. But he told her what he knew, and she listened with an intensity that made him feel seen in a way he never had before. One night she asked him to play music for her. He told her he did not know how to play any instrument. She seemed disappointed, then curious. "What do humans do when they are sad?" she asked. "Some of them cry," said. "Some of them drink, some of them fight." "What do you do?" He thought about this for a long moment. "I train. I exercise until my body is too tired to feel anything. Then I sleep without dreams." Nodded slowly. "I used to dance when I was sad, before died. We would dance together in the empty throne room when everyone else was asleep. He was a terrible dancer. He had no grace at all, but he tried so hard." She smiled at the memory. It was a real smile, full of love and loss. "I have not danced since he died," she said. "Perhaps you will dance again someday," said. "Perhaps, when I find something worth dancing for." The winter celebration arrived with great ceremony. Diplomats came from a dozen worlds. The palace filled with colors and sounds that seemed out of place in its crystal halls. Humans and a dozen other species mingled in careful patterns of politics and power. The banquet was held in the great hall. Tables stretched from wall to wall, covered in foods from every corner of the galaxy. Music played from instruments did not recognize. Laughter and conversation echoed off the crystal ceiling. Stood near the Queen's table watching the crowd. His eyes moved constantly, nodding faces, tracking movements, identifying potential threats. This was what he was trained to do. This was where he felt most himself. Sat at the head of the table, dressed in a gown of deep purple that made her silver eyes glow like stars. She spoke with diplomats and smiled at jokes and played the role of queen with practiced skill. But sometimes, between one conversation and the next, her eyes would find. And for a moment the mask would slip, and he would see the real beneath. The night grew late, guests began to leave, the music slowed. Felt something wrong. He could not say what it was. The air felt different. The shadows seemed deeper. Some instinct, trained through years of combat, screamed at him to pay attention. He scanned the room again. The servants moving between tables, the guards at the doors, the diplomats saying their farewells. There 3 servants near the kitchen entrance. They moved wrong. Their steps were too precise. Their hands stayed close to their bodies. Was moving before he finished the thought. The assassins struck. They were fast, faster than any servant should be. Crystal blades appeared from beneath their robes, catching the light as they drove toward the queen's table. The guards reacted, but they were too slow. They were trained for ceremony, not combat. Was trained for both. He threw himself between the first assassin and the queen. The blade meant for her heart cut into his shoulder instead. Pain exploded through him, hot and sharp, but he did not stop. He grabbed the assassin's arm and twisted. Bones cracked. The blade fell. The second assassin came from the left, ducked under the strike and drove his elbow into the attacker's throat. The assassin fell back, choking. The third assassin was smarter. He circled around, trying to reach the queen from the other side, pulled his weapon and fired twice. The shots were perfect. The assassin dropped. The first assassin was back on his feet, a second blade in his hand. He was, realized now, a separatist probably, one of those who opposed the alliance treaty. They fought. The assassin was skilled, but he was not a soldier. He had spent his life learning how to survive, how to protect, how to kill when killing was necessary. The fight lasted less than a minute. When it ended, 3 assassins lay on the floor. 2 were dead. 1 was unconscious. Turned to the queen. His shoulder was bleeding badly. His vision was starting to blur, but he had to make sure she was safe. Stood behind her chair, her hands gripping the crystal back so hard that it cracked. Her silver eyes were wide with shock. Around her, the court was in chaos. Guards were shouting. Diplomats were screaming. Servants were running. But saw none of it. She only saw. He tried to speak. He tried to tell her that everything was all right, that the threat was over, that she was safe. But the blood loss was too much. His legs gave out beneath him. He fell to the cold crystal floor. Was beside him before he hit the ground. She knelt in his blood, ignoring the damage to her gown, pressing her hands against his wound. "Stay with me," she commanded. Her voice shook. "That is an order." "Yes, Your Majesty." Telepathy reached out without her permission. Her mind touched his, trying to hold him to consciousness, trying to keep him alive. And in that moment she saw him. Not his face, not his body, his soul. She saw a boy alone in a military dormitory, teaching himself not to cry. She saw a young soldier carrying his fallen friend through a battlefield. She saw a man who had never been loved, who had never expected to be loved, who had given everything he had to duty because duty was all he had. She saw loneliness so deep it had become invisible. She saw loyalty so strong it had become existence. She saw a heart that protected because it knew no other way to live. She saw not his face, not his memories, but his essence, the same fire, the same devotion, the same beautiful, terrible willingness to die for those he served. Tears fell from her silver eyes. For the first time in 80 years, wept. "You will not die," she whispered. "I forbid it." Medical teams arrived. They took away, rushing him to the healing chambers. Followed, ignoring the protests of her advisors, ignoring the chaos of the court, ignoring everything except the human who had saved her life. She stayed at his bedside for 3 days. She did not sleep. She did not eat. She sat in a chair beside his bed and held his hand, and the court whispered about her madness. On the 3rd day, opened his eyes. He saw the crystal ceiling of an unfamiliar room. He felt the softness of a bed beneath him. He turned his head and saw Queen sitting beside him, her silver eyes red with tears, her face pale with exhaustion. "You are awake," she said, her voice cracked. "Your Majesty should not be here. There are duties." "Be quiet," she squeezed his hand. "You took a blade from me. You killed 3 assassins while bleeding to death. You have earned the right to be silent." Closed his eyes. He was too tired to argue. "You should not have risked yourself," said quietly. "You are not worth less than me." "It is my job, Your Majesty." No, her voice broke. It is more than that, and we both know it. Did not respond, but his fingers tightened around hers just slightly. And ancient queen of an empire of stars, sat beside a human soldier and let herself feel hope for the first time in 80 years. The healing took time. Medicine was advanced beyond anything humans had created, but even it could not repair a body overnight. Spent 2 weeks in the medical wing, drifting in and out of sleep, his shoulder slowly knitting itself back together. Visited him every day. At first she came for a few minutes, standing at the door watching him sleep. Then the visits grew longer. She would sit beside his bed and read reports. She would bring documents to sign. She would tell him about the court politics, the investigation into the assassins, the growing tension with the separatist factions. By the second week she was staying for hours. They would talk about nothing important: human food, art, the differences between their stars, simple things that had no weight but that built something between them that neither could name. The court noticed. The whispers grew louder. Advisor came to her chambers one evening. He walked slowly, leaning on his staff, his ancient face carved with worry. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing, "we must speak." Gestured for him to sit. She knew what was coming. "The court is talking," said. "They say you have become too close to the human. They say it is inappropriate. They say it is dangerous." "Let them talk." "Your Majesty, I have served you for 400 years. I loved as my own son. But this human is not. He cannot be. And if you project the dead onto the living, you will only find more grief." Was silent for a long moment. Through the window, she could see the 3 suns setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. "You think I do not know this," she finally said. "You think I do not understand the difference between memory and reality. I think grief can cloud even the mind." Stood and walked to the window. She looked out at the dying light of the suns. "When died, I wanted to die with him. I stood at the edge of the star bridge and looked down at the void, and I thought about falling, about ending the pain, about joining him in whatever comes after." Said nothing. He had not known this. "I stepped back because of duty, because the Dominion needed a queen, because there was no one else. I have lived for 80 years out of obligation, not desire. I have ruled an empire while feeling nothing. I have watched centuries pass like shadows on a wall." She turned to face him. "When that human walked into my throne room, I felt something. For the first time in 80 years, I felt something. Is it grief? Perhaps. Is it memory? Perhaps. But it is also something else, something I had forgotten existed." "What is that, Your Majesty?" "Life. I feel alive again." Was quiet for a long time. He looked at his queen, this woman he had served for centuries, and he saw something different in her eyes. Not the cold emptiness of duty, not the brittle shell of grief, something warmer, something fragile. "The court will not accept it," he said finally. "A human lives barely a century. You will watch him grow old and die. You will lose him just as you lost. I know. And still you choose this path." Smiled. It was a sad smile, but there was strength in it. "Used to say that the length of a fire does not matter. What matters is how bright it burns. Humans burn very bright. Perhaps that is why they accomplish so much in so little time." Nodded slowly. He did not agree with his queen's choice, but he understood it. After 400 years, he understood her heart. "I will do what I can to quiet the court," he said, "but I cannot work miracles. I do not ask for miracles, only for time." Returned to duty on the 3rd week. His shoulder was stiff and sore, but he could move. He could fight. He could protect. The palace felt different now. The guards looked at him with something other than cold disdain. Some of them nodded when he passed. Ladies smiled openly at him. Even, who had always been distant, sometimes stopped to speak with him. He had proven himself. He had bled for the queen. In culture, that meant something. But the biggest change was, she no longer hid behind the mask of royalty. When they walked together through the crystal gardens, she spoke freely. She laughed at his awkward attempts at humor. She touched his arm when making a point, a gesture so casual that it shocked the watching court. One evening she invited him to her private garden. It was a small space, hidden away in a quiet corner of the palace. Real plants grew here, not crystal imitations. Green leaves and small flowers, imported from a dozen different worlds. It was the only warm place in the entire palace. "Planted these," said, touching a leaf gently. He hated the crystal. He said it was beautiful but dead. He wanted something alive. Looked around the garden. He understood. He had felt the same way since arriving on Prime. "Tell me about him," he said. "Not the king, the man." Sat on a stone bench. Sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "He was terrible at politics," she said. "He said what he thought. He insulted diplomats without realizing it. He once told the ambassador of the empire that his proposal was stupid, directly, to his face." "What happened?" "The ambassador was so shocked that he agreed to our terms. No one had ever spoken to him honestly before." Smiled. "He sounds like a soldier." He was. He never stopped being one, even when he wore a crown. He used to say that a soldier's job was to protect, and a king's job was the same, just bigger. He was right. Looked at him. "You would have liked each other. You are very similar." "I am not like him." "No, you are not, but you carry the same fire, the same purpose, the same willingness to give everything for duty." Did not know how to respond to this. He had spent his whole life alone. He had never been compared to anyone. He had never belonged to anyone. "May I ask you something?" he said. "Yes." "Why me? There are 1,000 guards in this palace. 100 of them would die for you without hesitation. Why do you seek out my company?" Was quiet for a long moment. The artificial stars in the garden ceiling glowed softly overhead. "When I touch your mind," she said slowly, "I see something I have not seen in 80 years. I see loyalty without expectation, protection without demand, love without conditions." Love. Perhaps that is the wrong word. Purpose, devotion, a heart that gives without asking for anything in return. Had that, you have it too. "I do not know if I am capable of love," said quietly. "I have never had anything to love." "Perhaps that is why you love so purely. You have never learned to be selfish with it." Reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cool and smooth like polished stone, but her grip was strong. "I know this is strange for you," she said. "I know you did not ask for any of this. If my attention makes you uncomfortable, tell me and I will stop." Looked at their joined hands. He thought about all the years of emptiness, all the nights alone, all the battles fought for people who never thanked him, all the protection given to people who never saw him as anything more than a tool. And now here was a queen of an ancient empire, holding his hand in a garden of living things, asking if he wanted her to stop. "I do not want you to stop," he said. Smiled. It was a real smile, full and warm, and it transformed her face. For a moment, she did not look like a queen. She looked like a woman who had found something she thought she had lost forever. "Then I will not." They sat together in the garden as the artificial stars wheeled overhead. They did not speak. They did not need to. And somewhere in the palace, watched through a crystal window and shook his ancient head. Change had come to Prime. He only hoped it would bring more joy than sorrow. War came to Prime on a cold morning in early spring. The separatist factions had grown bold. They had made allies in the outer territories. They had gathered ships and soldiers. And now they descended upon the capital with one purpose: to end the Queen and break the alliance treaty forever. Was in the guard barracks when the alarm sounded. He ran to his post through corridors already filling with smoke and screaming. The palace shook with the impact of weapons fire from orbit. Crystal walls that had stood for cracked and shattered. He found in the throne room. She stood before the black crystal throne, dressed in simple clothes, her silver hair unbound. Was beside her, along with Lady and a handful of loyal guards. "The defense network is down," said, his voice tight with fear. "The orbital platforms have fallen. Ground forces are landing throughout the city." "How many?" asked. "Thousands, perhaps more." Turn 2. She met his eyes with calm determination. Whatever fear she felt was hidden deep behind the mask of a queen. "We need to evacuate you," he said. "No," her voice was steady. "This is my home, my throne, my people. I will not run." "Your Majesty." "The ancient defenses are still here. Weapons built into the palace foundations 1,000 years ago. Only the royal bloodline can activate them. If I leave, the city falls." Understood. He had read about the ancient defenses in the security briefings. They were powerful enough to destroy entire fleets, but they required the queen to be present, to be connected to the palace systems. "Then we hold the throne room," he said, "as long as we need to." Stepped forward. "I will take the guards to the outer gates. We will slow them down." Began. "I have served this family for 400 years. Let me serve it one more time." The old advisor smiled, a thin expression that held centuries of loyalty. "It has been my honor, Your Majesty." He bowed deeply, then led the guards away. Knew they would not survive. They were buying time with their lives. "Lady," said, "help organize the civilian evacuation. Get as many people out as you can." Looked at the queen with tears in her silver eyes. "I do not want to leave you." "I know, but there are children in this palace, families. They need someone to lead them to safety. Will you do this for me?" Nodded, unable to speak. She bowed and ran from the room. Turn 2. They were alone now. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. "You should go too," she said quietly. "There is no reason for you to die here." "There is every reason." "I swore an oath to protect you. I will keep that oath. That is who I am." Looked at him for a long moment. Then she crossed the distance between them and took his hands in hers. "In another life," she said, "in another time, things would have been different between us. I know. I want you to know that these past months have meant more to me than the last 80 years combined. You gave me hope. You gave me life. Whatever happens today, I want you to know that." Squeezed her hands. He was not good with words. He had never been good with words, but he tried. "You saw me," he said. "No one has ever seen me. Not really. You looked at a human soldier and saw something worth knowing. That is a gift I can never repay." Smiled through her tears. "Then let us see this through together." The attack on the throne room came an hour later. The separatists broke through the outer gates. They fought their way through the corridors, leaving death in their wake. Fell defending the inner gates, his old body finally giving out. But he took a dozen enemies with him. Gathered the remaining guards, a mix of humans and who had come to respect him. They set up defenses at the throne room doors. They piled furniture and crystal debris into barriers. They prepared for the final stand. The enemy came in waves, fought at the front, his weapons singing death into the ranks of the separatists. He moved like water, like fire, like nothing they had ever seen. He was everything his training had made him. Every lesson, every battle, every moment of suffering had prepared him for this. The guards followed his lead. They fought with a ferocity they had never shown before. Humans and, side by side, dying for a queen and a cause larger than themselves. The separatist leader came last. He was tall and powerful, enhanced with forbidden technology that made him faster and stronger than any natural. His eyes glowed with cybernetic implants. His voice echoed with artificial amplification. "The queen dies today," he said, "and your precious alliance dies with her." "Over my body," replied. "That can be arranged." They fought. The leader was faster, stronger, enhanced beyond anything had ever faced. He took hits that would have killed a normal being. He struck with force that shattered crystal. Was outmatched, he knew it, but he did not fight to win. He fought to delay. Every second he bought was another second to activate the ancient defenses. Every moment was another chance for survival. He took wounds, his arm, his side, his leg. Blood soaked his uniform, his vision blurred, but he did not fall, he could not fall, not yet. "Why do you fight?" the leader demanded, driving to his knees. "You are human, this is not your war, this is not your world." Looked up at him. Through the pain, through the exhaustion, he smiled. "A soldier's job is to protect," he said, "and a good soldier never stops." He lunged forward, driving his blade into a gap in the leader's armor. It was not a killing blow, but it was enough to stagger the enemy, enough to buy one more moment. Behind him, the throne room filled with light. Stood before the ancient throne, her hands pressed against the black crystal, her mind connected to systems that had slept for centuries. Power flowed through her, ancient and terrible. The palace itself became a weapon. Beams of pure energy lanced upward from the crystal towers. The enemy fleet in orbit burned. Ground forces scattered as the very ground beneath them shifted and struck. The ancient defenses of Prime awakened, and they were hungry. The separatist leader looked up at the blazing sky. He understood that he had failed. He turned to flee. Did not let him. With the last of his strength, he grabbed the leader's leg and held on. The leader struck him, again and again, but would not let go. He held on until the Alliance reinforcements arrived. He held on until soldiers poured into the throne room. He held on until the leader was captured and the battle was won. Then finally he let go. Found him in the medical bay, stabilized but unconscious. The doctors said he would live, but he would carry scars for the rest of his life. She sat beside his bed and took his hand, just as she had done after the assassination attempt. When he woke, she was there. Her silver eyes were red with tears, but she was smiling. "You saved us," she said. "We saved each other." She leaned close. "My people say humans burn too brightly and die too quickly. They say loving one is foolish." Looked at her. Despite the pain, despite the exhaustion, he felt something warm spreading through his chest, something he had never felt before. "What do you say?" he asked. Reached out and touched his face, gentle and tender. "I say the flames are worth the darkness that follows." She kissed his forehead. It was a simple gesture, innocent, but it carried the weight of centuries, the hope of a new beginning, the promise of something neither of them had dared to dream. Outside, the three suns rose over a damaged but unbroken city. The court would talk, the alliance would debate, 1,000 political consequences would unfold. But in this moment, there was only a queen who had learned to feel again, and a human soldier who had taught her that even ghosts can lead us back to life. The story was not over, perhaps it was only beginning. But for now, in a room of crystal and light, two souls who had found each other across the vast distances of space held hands and watched the sunrise. And that was enough.